Kia ora tātou, good evening. I'm Rod Oram, and it's my great pleasure to be emceeing this evening, so welcome to Unitec's Forum for the Future Year 3. This year's Be the Change, and we have four wonderful forums over the next few weeks, starting tonight with Creating Resilient Communities. It's going to be a very interactive session, as our forums for the future have been in the last 2 years. And we've got various inputs into this very lively discussion. First of all, we'll have our panellists here in the room. So we've got, and I'll give them fuller introductions later, Ludo Campbell-Reid, Brady Nixon, Ken Smith, Matthew Bradbury and David Shearer. My apologies, Matthew. And Patrick Clifford we're still waiting for. In addition, you, the studio audience, are very important in this discussion, so we were looking for a very full participation from you. And then thirdly, we've got our online audience, and at this point I'd like to introduce Richard Reed, who's standing over there. And Richard is an urban architect and landscape architect himself, but he's in the control room watching the Twitter feed and emails, and we hope to engage our live streaming audience with some direct input from some of them with video Skype. So that's going to be the technology high wire act when we try to bring some of them in. So periodically you'll see Richard coming in with some of the emails and some of the comments for me to be able to relay that part of the proceedings to you. And Richard, you...
Yes, Rod, I can just say that this is the first time that Unitec's done a live and just for the online viewers, if I can come forward.
Yeah.
Online viewers are asked to participate in 3 ways. So if you first can Twitter using the hashtag UnitecFTF, or email us a written comment or a question at uftf11@gmail.com and use the subject heading written. And thirdly, you can converse with us via webcam using Skype. And the way to do this is to email us at, again, the same email address, uftf11@gmail.com, and use the subject heading webcam. And give us a short 1-sentence abstract of your comment and include your Skype name in your email, and we'll contact you and most likely connect you to the forum. Okay, thanks, Rod.
Thanks very much indeed, Richard. Now, I was going to start off by warming you up as an audience and seek your participation right away. And in looking around and thinking about cities a bit, I came across this wonderful quote from John Berger, a British author, who in 1987 wrote an article about Paris in Harper's Magazine. And he said, "Every city has a sex and an age, which have nothing to do with demography. Rome is feminine, so is Odessa. London is a teenager, an urchin, and, in this, hasn't changed since the time of Dickens. Paris, I believe, is a man in his 20s in love with an older woman." So any suggestions as to what sex and age Auckland might be, for example? Any offers on that score? Or Hamilton? Or Tekawiti? Well, I'll offer one. I grew up in Birmingham, in the Midlands, which is a very industrial town. And I'll pause just to welcome Patrick. Patrick.
I was going to say that Auckland's a bastard. It took me an hour to get here.
And what age of bastard would you suggest?
I'd say it's an old bastard.
An old bastard, yes. And sort of breaking down a bit at the corners.
Exactly. Exactly.
Welcome.
Thank you. My apologies.
No, it's quite all right. So I grew up in Birmingham, a very industrial city in the Midlands in the UK. And as I was growing up in the 1950s and 60s, many winter days ended very early, very dark, very smoggy, very industrial city. But sort of post-industrial, Birmingham has taken on a different life of its own. And for example, it alleges it has a greater length of canal heritage of the Industrial Revolution than Venice has. and it started to develop those a bit. So for me, Birmingham is not so much a person, but I kind of liken Birmingham to a pit pony that, 1 week a year gets to come out of the pit and frolic around up in the sunlight. And I kind of feel that's where Birmingham's at these days, even though I haven't lived there since I was 18. So it's that sense of cities may have had a great past behind them and yet may have a great future ahead of them. But that sense of resilience, that cities and communities can spring back from all that life throws at them. So, long one about Birmingham. Any other offers around the place? Panellists, an age and a sex of a city. Well, we've had Auckland's a bastard.
An outburst.
Yes.
Auckland could be a teenager for me, because it's sort of it's still sort of unformed, and it's still kind of it's still in a sense childlike and beautiful on the one hand, but on the other hand doesn't exactly know what it wants to be or how and then goes into these sort of funks every now and then and annoys us all. So it's one of those. I find Auckland incredibly frustrating,
yes.
largely because of the administration around Auckland. I mean, Auckland is wonderful despite the planners. I mean, in a way, It's
and Ken, New York. What do you think the age and sex of New York is?
New York is eternal, but maybe not as eternal as Rome. But feels like an old city.
Yeah. Male or female?
It's male or maybe androgynous, but it's probably male.
I thought you were going to say hermaphrodite.
That's right.
It could be that too. Maybe it's all about money in New York, and I guess money is androgynous.
Yes, indeed. Any other offers around the room? Right, yeah. Well, look, it's wonderful to think of cities of being as very alive in those ways. And as a way of getting the discussion going, I'd suggested to the panelists that I would just introduce each of them briefly and then ask them what is their favourite example of resilience in a city or in the people of a city that they've come across from around the world. And the first person I'm going to turn to is Ken. Now, Ken Smith is a landscape architect from New York, and he is a guest here at Unitec, and we've already kept him very busy at Unitec with lots of lectures and media appearances and all the rest so far. Ken is known as one of a new generation of landscape architects, equally at home in the worlds of art, architecture, and urbanism. He's been a visiting design critic, as the term goes, at Harvard School of Graduate Design from 1997 to the present, and he's been involved in all sorts of projects, such as being a member of one of the teams competing for the World Trade Center competition in 2002, and most recently he was awarded a major commission for a 530-hectare urban park on the decommissioned El Toro Marine Base in Orange County. So, Ken, when you think of a favourite example of resilience, what springs to mind for you?
Well, New York is the city I know best, so I'm going to give a counterintuitive answer. I think that the commissioner's grid of 1811, which was speculative grid to make New York efficient with wide avenues and narrow streets and rectangular blocks. When you think of a grid, you think of something that's not resilient, something that's very rigid. But in fact, that grid over time has been remarkably resilient. The city has actually shifted around. Districts have moved within that grid. It's counterintuitive, but the grid is an open enough structure that has allowed the city to change over time. So that would be my answer to start with.
That's a great answer, which has great relevance to us, because the centre of Christchurch is virtually destroyed because of the earthquake since last year. And the street grid there goes right back to the 1850s, laid out ahead of the first European settlers to the city. And so it will be extremely interesting to see, as Christchurch comes back to life, whether it picks up on its grid, which still has a lot of coherence,
right.
Or whether people might do something different with it.
I mean, I suspect that the grid is more enduring than what the architecture was previously.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you. Now, I'm going to turn secondly to Patrick. Now, Patrick is president of the New Zealand Institute of Architects, and he's design director at Architectus here in Auckland. And he's a winner of numerous national and international awards. He has been an adjunct professor of design here at Unitec and is a visiting critic at the School of Architecture at the University of Auckland, and has been involved with a large number of buildings, such as the university's mathematics, statistics and computer science building. So, Patrick, when you think of resilience in a community, in a people, in a city, what's one of your favourite examples?
Well, I guess, Rod, a favourite example implies that you've kind of got a list of them. And I'd have to say it wasn't something that I immediately could locate, like my list of, desert island discs or that sort of thing. And I guess, though, that I do understand, though, that cities kind of come and go. That's, I suppose, inherent. And when we think of resilience, we do tend to think of infrastructure. But I guess when I thought about this, I was reminded of that Louis Kahn quote when he talked about the idea that a city should be a place that when you take a small child there for the first time, they want to spend the rest of their life there. And that's an idea about cities as kind of places and people. And so as a small boy, I grew up in Wellington, or as a boy. And at that time, Wellington, I suppose, was a kind of a place of civil servants, a windy city full of self-doubt, and it's suburbs sprawling, across the hillside around it. Now, and I remember the mayor at that time used to drive a Mark 10 Jaguar, a black one, and wore a kind of Soviet-style suit. In fact, he looked quite like an architect, I suppose. Yeah. a black suit, now that I think about it. But, a change of leadership, a sort of a new way of thinking about itself. And Wellington, bureaucrats became, or have become, kind of sage mandarins, and coffee's the kind of currency. And Wellington now is not that grey place. And that, to my mind, is the kind of resilient, is an idea about resilience of cities that come and go. And I suppose I've felt at times that perhaps my own timing was somewhat awry to be there as a boy and here as an older boy. And but I've got the feeling that Auckland is in a resilient frame of mind.
I hope so, because just in terms of the sheer speed of development of Auckland, when my family and I arrived in Auckland in 1997, the population had only just gone over 1 million people. And we're 1.45 million now, and we will probably be 2 million by about 2030. So that's a very rapid development. And in fact, if Auckland had been a US city through the 2000s, I think we would have ranked as something like the 5th fastest growing US city. But we don't think or plan or develop in those ways, and it shows. Yes.